So these cheap OLED monitors caught my attention. And when I say cheap, I mean cheap for an OLED monitor, keep that in mind. But how can this one, a 360Hz QD-OLED monitor, go for around 550 US on a good day, while most monitors with these specs cost like at least 100 or 200 bucks more? And make no mistake, all these 360Hz QD-OLED monitors, no matter the brand, are using the exact same panel made by Samsung Display. So the more affordable ones can't be all that bad, right? To find out, I got these three. All of them use QD-OLED panels and are typically among the cheapest OLED gaming monitors you can buy. I've even seen this one right here for as low as 400 US. Okay, it only has the downclocked 240Hz version of that panel, but the price is actually close to what you could pay for a similarly spec'd IPS monitor. So where's the catch? Well, one of these is from a brand called Titan Army, which isn't exactly the most recognizable brand name on the planet. And also, just because they're all using basically the same panel, it doesn't automatically mean you're getting the same level of color accuracy, the same input lag, or the same user experience with every monitor. Because the tuning and firmware can still make or break the final product. And then there's burn-in. We're talking OLED, so anti-burn-in features and burn-in warranties do play a role. Some brands offer pretty generous burn-in coverage for their OLEDs, and others not so much. But let's start with the image quality. Here are all three running the same test footage, all of them adjusted to 140 nits using the default color settings. And as you would expect, these look pretty similar, but not identical. There are some subtle differences, especially in this scene, where the AOC leans more into an orange-yellow, while the other two are leaning more towards red. But all of them deliver the perfect blacks you'd expect from an OLED panel, and all three monitors have this super high color saturation you'd expect from QD OLED panels specifically. When it comes to out-of-the-box color accuracy though, there is a clear winner. Titan Army did a great job with the factory setup, especially the white point. The other two both have a magenta tint, but that's something we can fix with some custom settings. Now Titan Army also made super accurate sRGB mode. It's a bit of a pity that enabling it disables a bunch of OSD options, including the color temperature, but that's the case with all three monitors. So Titan Army clearly takes the win for out-of-the-box color accuracy in SDR. But let's apply some custom settings. And here's what they look like now. I have a link to these settings and to the ICC profile in the video description, by the way. Here we're comparing them uncalibrated, without ICC profiles, just with the custom settings. And honestly, at this point, the differences are getting too subtle to even worry about. It clearly shows that these three are using basically the same panel. The numbers are so close now that the remaining differences probably just come down to minor panel variants from Samsung Display. But what about the brightness? This panel usually does about 250 nits full screen in most monitors, and that's just what we're getting here too. The differences are negligible, which is great to see. I'm also glad that the minimum brightness setting gets super low on each of these monitors. That said, the brightness on OLED monitors doesn't necessarily stay consistent all the time. Some models dim the screen depending on the content and the settings you're using. Monitors that use these Samsung panels come with a feature called multi-logo detection that can cause some pretty annoying dimming behavior. On some monitors with this panel, like Alienware's models, you can't even turn this feature off, it's permanently enabled. This probably reduces the burn-in risk, but it's super annoying. Because unlike the name suggests, the multi-logo detection doesn't only kick in when a logo is detected, but instead it's triggered by lots of things on screen, like white windows or bright websites. And instead of dimming just the bright object, it dims down the whole display. And all three monitors have this feature. As you can see, they decrease the brightness by about 30 nits when the detection kicks in. But here's the good news. You can disable or enable this feature directly from the OSD menu on each of these monitors. So it's entirely your choice, and this feature is even disabled by default on all three monitors. With this feature turned off, the brightness stays consistent across different APLs or window sizes, so that's a big win for these over the more expensive Alienware model that's using the same panel. Now when it comes to HDR, it's really not surprising that all three of these monitors make HDR content look pretty good. We're getting those classic punchy colors that are typical for QD OLEDs, and the contrast in a darkroom is perfect too. Small highlights like these little specular light dots just pop. All three of these have a peak brightness of roughly 1000 nits in small window sizes, which makes HDR footage like this look really impressive on all three monitors. But as you've probably noticed, there's something off with the Titan Army monitor. The colors just don't look quite right. Especially yellow and orange tones are often way too saturated, and it tends to artificially brighten up parts of the image, making darker scenes brighter than they're supposed to be. And the measurements confirm what the eye already picks up. The EOTF tracking on the Titan Army is completely off, and the color accuracy in the peak HDR mode is abysmal. The other two monitors, on the other hand, actually do a pretty solid job, especially considering that these peak brightness HDR modes usually sacrifice a bit of accuracy to hit those high brightness numbers. Now visually, the Titan Army's peak HDR mode doesn't look terrible or anything, it's just a bit too much. It's too bright, too vibrant, and just not accurate. Luckily, there's also the HDR 400 mode, and that improves things quite a bit. Both the average delta E as well as the EOTF tracking are much better in this mode. The performance of the Philips is comparable, both monitors do a good job, but the third one, the AOC, somehow messes up the EOTF tracking in its HDR 400 mode. To the eye, it still looks decent, but it could be better really. Side by side, it's clear that the Titan Army monitor still leans into more of a flashy look with vibrant colors, while Philips and AOC went for a more subtle look. But all of them look pretty good if you ask me. Still, the Philips clearly comes out on top when it comes to HDR. It just has the most balanced HDR performance across both the peak HDR as well as the HDR 400 mode. But yeah, you're probably not gonna buy a high refresh rate OLED monitor just for watching HDR movies. So what about gaming? Well, the response times of all three of these monitors are amazing and basically identical, which really is no surprise since we're looking at OLEDs. However, the AOC is the only monitor of these three that's clocked at 240Hz, while the other two both run at 360Hz. So there is a difference between them when it comes to high refresh rate gaming. You can see that in these UFO photos. All three monitors look identical at 240Hz, but when we bump the Titan Army and the Philips up to 360Hz, there is a slight improvement in motion sharpness. It's really not a night and day difference, but if you're really into fast-paced shooters, going with one of the 360Hz models can be worth it. And the high refresh rate also brings a very small latency advantage. But really, all three perform great and are just as fast as their more expensive counterparts. I've been switching between these three monitors a lot while playing Valorant, and honestly I sometimes kind of forgot whether I was using one of the 360Hz monitors or the 240Hz model and had to take a glance at the logo to see which one I had connected. In games like Valorant, it's really not a huge difference. One feature I came to appreciate though is the ambi-glow backlight of the Philips monitor. It's actually pretty strong, so that it can genuinely work as a bias light. It's much stronger than your typical RGB gimmick light that the other two monitors have. I do wish it had a more neutral white as a color option, but even as it is, it does help reduce eye strain when you're gaming or working in a darker room. Honestly, that's a pretty premium feature to see on a relatively affordable OLED monitor. And you know, it's especially handy on a QD-OLED monitor like this. See, these Samsung display QD-OLED panels have an annoying flaw. The perfect OLED blacks are gone as soon as light hits the screen. The blacks immediately turn into this washed out grayish magenta tone, which is kinda annoying. So with the QD-OLED monitor, getting lights behind your monitor is basically your only option. So having a capable bias light already built into the monitor is super practical. Bias lighting is a good idea with any monitor, but for QD-OLEDs it's almost mandatory. The other two monitors don't have any standout features as good as this ambi-glow backlight, but the AOC at least has this asymmetrical stand-based design that's quite unique. The shape makes it super easy to get the monitor close to the mousepad, and I much prefer this over these V-shaped stands that take up way too much space on the desk. Now, but another thing we need to talk about is burn-in. After all, we're talking OLED, and OLED monitors can burn in. And all three monitors ship with the usual anti-burn-in arsenal: pixel orbiting, panel refresh, multi-logo detection, you name it. And it's good to have these options if you want to use them. Personally though, I like to turn everything but the screensaver off. And the monitors from Philips and AOC allow that, but Titan Army insists on keeping the pixel orbiting feature permanently enabled. You can turn everything else off, but you gotta keep the pixel orbiting. It's a subtle effect, but personally I find it pretty annoying. I'm also not a huge fan of Titan Army's burn-in policy, to say the least. The good news is, their warranty terms are pretty short. The bad news, the warranty only lasts 1 year and doesn't explicitly cover burn-in. In fact, they specifically exclude natural depreciation and wear and tear, so if you end up with burn-in, you're probably on your own. Now, Philips, on the other hand, does explicitly cover burn-in. They even have a generous 3-year warranty period, which is nice to see. However, catch is that you need to follow their care instructions or otherwise you avoid your warranty. They even have this little PDF document telling you what to do and what to avoid. But honestly, the terms are pretty reasonable and essentially boil down to not displaying static content for hours on end. They don't even require you to use all the care features like pixel orbiting or the multi-logo detection. Unfortunately though, these warranty terms are exclusive to the EU. And if you search the warranty terms for the US, you don't find a word about burn-in or image retention. And Philips USA explicitly rules out wear and tear, so it looks like US buyers don't get any burn-in coverage whatsoever. AOC is pretty similar to Philips in this regard. In the EU, they do explicitly cover burn-in under their 3-year warranty, which is great, but it looks like US buyers are out of luck. And just like with Philips, you have to follow their care instructions to avoid risking your warranty. Again, these terms seem kind of reasonable, but these are a bit more restrictive than Philips terms. I'm not a fan that AOC wants a 4-hourly pixel refresh and also requires the pixel orbiting to stay on. Generally, I'm wondering what the purpose of these terms and conditions really is. Are they just trying to stop people from running static content 24/7 and then asking for a warranty replacement? Or are these terms just an easy way for them to dodge legit burn-in claims? I mean, it'd be pretty simple for them to just say you didn't follow their guidelines, right? And honestly, it's probably pretty hard to even verify whether someone actually did. So yeah, if burn-in coverage is something that worries you, going with one of the more premium monitors that use this panel can actually make sense. And that's especially true if you're in the US. I mean, Philips' EU warranty policy is pretty decent, and AOC's EU policy isn't totally bad either. But if you're in the US and want burn-in coverage, you gotta look somewhere else and probably gonna pay a premium for that. Going with one of the more expensive OLEDs from MSI and ASUS, for example, gets you a full 3-year burn-in coverage, and this seems to apply globally, including the US. You still 100% need to read the fine print though. MSI, for instance, also requires certain anti-burn-in features to stay active, so that's something to keep in mind. But at the very least, that's comparable to Philips and AOC's burn-in policy in the EU, and you get this in the US as well, so that's a win. Performance-wise though, these 3 monitors, despite being some of the cheapest in the market, can easily compete with the more expensive QD-OLED monitors. I'm especially impressed with this Philips monitor. It's the most well-rounded of these 3. And even ignoring the price tag, I think it's one of the best monitors with this panel in the market. I mean, that Ambiglow bias light alone is pretty useful and a unique feature that all the other monitors just don't have. And given how similar the performance of all these monitors that use Samsung's QD-OLED panel really is, a feature like this is more than enough to make it stand out. Thanks for watching, bis zum nächsten Video.